Good morning, everybody. How are you today? I hope you're having a good time today, wherever you're in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you've been having a good time wherever you are in the world. And we have been having a good time, and it's a joy to come back to you this Thursday on Unplugged. And Unplugged today, we're still on a mini series, Food, Glorious Food. And I'll tell you one thing for sure that this has been a totally fascinating series. It has been a totally fascinating series for all of us. We've learned so much. Last week we were with Jackie Parenter, and I do apologize for the poor audio. We are doing something about it. It'll take a little time, but if you go on our YouTube channel at Julia Jack's Consulting, you will find a better quality of the video. And from Jackie, we've had so much feedback from people about different ways in which we can do vertical planting, horizontal planting, different ways in which we can actually have edible gardens and produce our own food, which is healthy for us and is also very economical, more economical. We can't plant everything, but we can have some things. Welcome to everybody who's joined us. Hi, Yasin. Welcome to the people on, I guess, on Instagram. I can't see all your names, but I can see Oluguyemi, Samuel, Uchenna, Godfirst, Matthew, and thank you all for joining us. Our guest today is someone that I'm totally fascinated with, so I'm not going to spend so much time talking about the past. Our guest today is Aisha Bashir. Now, how do you go to Stanford University, return, and then decide you want to work in dairies? How did that happen? And how is it going? Those are some of the questions that I want to ask. Why dairy? Why not something else that might be an easier win? So those are some of the things that we're going to ask Aisha today as we welcome her first to. Hi, Aisha.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Now let me add you on to let me see. Inviting you to. So I keep spelling dairies as diaries.
That's okay. Maybe I can request to join and let's see if that works.
Okay, let's see that. Yeah, let's do that. But we already have Cam Dairies on here. I don't know. Has anybody joined on your behalf?
No, maybe let me go off Instagram and then let's see. Here we go. So I'm just waiting for you to add me, I guess. Let's see.
Okay. The
Sorry,
network has gone off.
everyone. The network
Net,
isn't so great.
yeah, network has gone off again. Okay. I think we're adding and re-adding. Oh my goodness. There has to be an easier way of doing this. I tell you.
This is part of what it's like operating in Nigeria.
It is. It is. It is. I can't see myself, but I'm here. And if you guys can hear me, I'm here. Thank you to everybody who's joined us. And let's let the games begin. So Aisha,
Hello.
I have a very simplistic question.
Okay.
Okay, the milk that we get from the evaporated milk, does that also come from you or from people like you? I'm just asking generally. I'm not asking. I'm not going to mention any brand names, but
So no. So yes, it started from a cow. Yes, the milk started from a cow. So evaporated milk, the ones that we consume in Nigeria, they start from a cow somewhere in Europe. That cow is milked, and then they extract all the water from the milk. So you're left with a powder. And then what happens after that is more and more recently, we're seeing that they're taking out the milk fat and then replacing it with vegetable fat because it's cheaper.
okay.
And then that is now put on a container, shipped to Nigeria, spends however long it spends in a port being cleared. And then locally, it's redistributed to various companies who then add water and other ingredients to it to reconstitute it to make it into evaporated milk.
Okay, okay, you've cleared that up because I kept thinking about like, how is it made? Could it really be the same? But it isn't. It isn't. So that explains something that you put in your link to your company's LinkedIn profile that we use real milk from real cows to make real dairy. That would explain that what you
Yeah.
that
So when
kind
we
of
talk
tongue in
about real
cheek, right?
milk, yeah. I mean, somewhere in our communication, you will see a section where we talk about fake milk has no business calling itself dairy. But essentially, when we talk about real milk, what we mean is milk that's come directly from the cow and has spent the shortest time possible to get to the consumer. So when you think about other forms of dairy that go through a lot of processing, that are imported, that go through a very long journey before they eventually find their way to the table or fridge of a consumer, that journey, that time is what we kind of differentiate as what we see as real versus not, right? We're talking about milk that's fresh and has spent the shortest amount of time between when it was milked from the cow and when it arrived at the consumer's table.
Great. Can you walk us through the well, I call it the ecosystem. You probably call it something else, but from the pastoralist to your factory, what's the journey like?
So our pastoralists typically milk their cows probably between 6:30 and 8 in the morning. And so when at Cham, we say that we're building the infrastructure that makes real dairy possible. So we've had to first spend time identifying where these pastoralists are located, specifically pastoralists that have milking cows. And then in doing so, we have had to essentially map them. So we get GPS coordinates of where each of these pastoralists are located. We then map where they are. Then we design milk collection routes. So these are the routes that each of our CHAM rangers, we call them. So these are field officers that are from the community. So they then go to each milk collection point, and they are assigned a set of pastoralists that go to a milk collection point to deliver their milk. So they deliver their milk to these milk collection points. They then bike this milk over to a milk aggregation center where everybody comes and pulls their milk. All along this time, we test the milk for various things. So we test the milk for, first you just do an organoleptic test. And what that basically means is that you smell the milk, you look at the milk. Does it look right? Is it the right color? Does it have debris in it? Is it dirty? Do you see particles inside? Then you smell the milk. So if you work in dairy, you know what good milk smells like and what bad milk smells like. So you just do basic tests where you smell the milk to make sure that it smells okay. Then we do an alcohol test. And literally that test is to determine spoilage to some extent. And so basically we mix the milk with this alcohol mixture, and we just check it. So you just shake it, you put equal amounts into a container, you shake it, and if it has any, if it curdles, I think the best way I always describe it to people is when a infant throws up, that consistency is what you're looking to looking for. If you see that kind of curdled,
like cottage cheese.
Exactly. Then you know the milk is bad. But when it stays clear, then the milk is okay. So we get it to our milk aggregation center. We weigh it, we test it again to make sure that the milk is still okay before it gets transported to our factory. So essentially what we do is within 4 hours of milking is the time it takes from when the cow is milked and the milk arrives at our factory. What we're trying to do now is to set up milk aggregation centers that have cooling facilities so that we can collect milk from further distances, cool it at these facilities, and therefore it doesn't need to get to the factory within 4 hours of milking, seeing as it's being chilled. Right now, we don't have those chilling facilities in place. We currently have invested in them, and within a couple of months, those will be set up. So typically, raw milk needs to be refrigerated or processed within 4 hours of milking.
Okay. So I saw on the video, and guys, if you haven't seen the video, please go on the Cham Dairies website and see they have an incredible video which tells you the story, but it tells it so beautifully that I couldn't even replicate or try to replicate that story. It's told in incredible pictures. You know, it's wonderful. And one of the things I saw was this may be maybe your Cham Rangers. They had refrigerated, like freezer bags, or maybe it's a bit more high level than freezer bags, you know. But they had something. They didn't just take the milk and put it in a hot container. They put it in something that could chill it. Am I correct?
No, so I think what you're talking about. So they put it in this milk churn, but there's a strain, like a cheesecloth strainer, that they pour the milk through, which also creates an added level of filtration for the milk.
Okay. So at every point in time, it's very important to you that the milk stays in as fresh a form as possible.
Sorry, I think I lost you for a second. Could you repeat the question again?
Yes. So I said, at every point in time, your goal is to make sure the milk stays as fresh as possible.
Exactly. So we are different to other, I guess, dairy players in the market because we're focused on fresh, but we're focused on also kind of maintaining as much of the goodness from the original source as we can in our products, so that our customers get as much of the nutrients, the protein, and the good bacteria that's inside our products as well.
So when we say dairy, I mean, let's talk dairy. Is milk the only product you're looking at?
No, and that's such a good question because doing this work in Nigeria made me realize that there was an assumption that people knew what the word dairy meant. And it is actually not widely known in Nigeria. So when you say dairy, sometimes people look at you confused. And then you say milk and they're like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about, right? And that also made us realize that you have to ask yourself, how much do Nigerians know about where their food comes from, right? And when you talk to and when you talk to people and try and ask them to kind of trace it back for you, a lot of us don't know where our food comes from. A lot of us, if we haven't grown up in farming communities or seen what happens in farms, really don't have an idea of how, you know, a potato comes from farm to you, how tomato paste arrives at the supermarket and the process it goes through to be packaged and ready for consumption. So similarly with dairy, a lot of people don't know the term dairy because as a country, our per capita consumption of dairy is so low. So we consume about 2 kg of milk per person per year in Nigeria, if you look at it on a total
Really?
population standpoint. The Africa average is 44 kg per person per year. So we're 22 times, Africans in general are consuming 22 times the amount of milk than the average Nigerian.
Now
Just
this is
sit with that for
really,
a moment.
I can't.
That's
I
how
just can't
bad.
sit with that. Wow.
That's how far behind we are, right? And I always say to people, just step back and think about when you think about, foreign programs that are targeted towards children. Dairy, there's always dairy somewhere there. There's always a glass
Mhm,
of milk. There's always
mhm.
yogurt. There's something children are consuming. And why is that? It's because dairy is a huge aspect of childhood nutrition because of the nutrients it contains, right? You hear all of these Western stories about, a glass of milk is important. You should have 1 glass of milk a day, all of those things, right? It's because of the nutrients that milk contains. And I'll give you one fun fact. Milk is more hydrating than water.
Really? Okay,
Right?
I'm gonna
Because
throw another fun
hydration
fact
is
at
not
you.
just about the water, but about all the other things that are in the water that helps you retain the water, right? And conserve it in your body to stay hydrated.
Okay. I want to throw one more fun fact at you. They say many black people of African descent, do not process milk or dairy and dairy products properly. Is that true or is that a myth?
No, it's not a myth. We have, and it's lactose. So, what the intolerance is to something called lactose. So, if you look at kind of more from a genetic standpoint, Black people have a higher level of lactose intolerance than white people. And essentially, it's just tolerance built through generations, right? So white people had more access to fresh milk and fresh dairy. And so they've consumed it for generations. And that tolerance has built up over time. Whilst places like Nigeria, that tolerance has, or Black nations, have had those that have had less access to dairy, so to speak, and haven't consumed it over generations, have a lower tolerance for lactose. So, and that is very clearly seen in Nigeria, for example, where people in northern Nigeria have a higher tolerance for lactose than people in
I was
southern
just going to
Nigeria.
ask you that. Yeah, I was just going
So
to ask
even
that
within
because,
countries, those
yeah,
numbers can be very different depending on where you are, simply because of your frequency of consumption of dairy products, and then also generational consumption of dairy products as well.
okay, okay. It makes sense to me now. It makes a lot of sense because I'm one of those who's lactose intolerant, and that means I hardly take any dairy. Maybe that's why our parents, grandparents used to tell us once you're older, you're not a teenager anymore. You don't need milk. You know, I don't know.
But
Maybe.
what's interesting to, I think people also don't realize is, or I find people say, oh, I find that I can have cheese, but I can't have milk. Or I find that, my stomach handles yogurt better than it does like fresh milk. Like I can't do fresh milk. And the reason is because the lactose content in milk is the highest and it gets lower as you go into these different foods. So cheese has a lower lactose concentration, I guess, than yogurt, for example. So there is a spectrum of how much lactose is contained in different dairy products as well.
Okay, so to get back to my original comment about you before you came on, Stanford graduates, and now you're dealing with pastoralists. Why? Why dairy? Not that they don't deserve it, but why? What made you decide?
So I think my journey to this started from, I think so for me, when I look at kind of the state of Nigeria and the role I want to play in Nigeria's future development, right? I think I've always thought about wanting to do something that is in service to the most underserved of our population. So when you look at the most underserved of our population, that is the poorest of the poor in Nigeria, those are farmers. So undoubtedly, farming communities, rural communities, that's where the poorest of the population resides. So if you have the poorest of the poor are within farming communities, then for me, it was obvious that whatever work I needed to do had to be somewhere within agriculture. So I took a 1-year sabbatical off work and traveled and spoke to people who are working in agriculture, spoke to farmers, spoke to investors, spoke to anybody really that I could to understand what's going on in agriculture in Nigeria. Why are we importing so much food? Why are we not processing enough? What's happening? Is it a structural problem? Is it a funding problem? Is it that we just can't grow certain things in Nigeria? So I really spent that time trying to understand. I was reading a lot of articles and journals, and realized that we're just not doing enough. There are just not that many people working in agriculture. Most people working in agriculture are doing what they did generations and generations ago. We don't have a lot of investment. We don't have a lot of innovation. And that's just, farmers have continued to do what they can to survive and feed their families. So the first thing I realized is the problem wasn't that we were doing so much and it just wasn't working. We just weren't doing anything, right? And I am being very generalistic here. Of course, there are a lot of people investing in agriculture and doing amazing things. But on an aggregate level, for a size of a country like Nigeria, we're not scratching the surface. So that's number one. And then secondly, my next question was, why are we importing so much food? Well, if we're not investing in agriculture, we won't be able to figure out that supply chain that's required to feed our population. So I'm sure in your previous conversations, you've talked about post-harvest losses, right? They say up to 50% of the tomatoes that come from southern Nigeria to northern Nigeria to southern Nigeria gets lost because it just spoils by the time it gets to its destination, right? So we also just have there's also a question around, it's not just about whether we're producing enough, it's about whether we're distributing what we're producing equally, right? So it may be that we are in some crops, for some food items, we may be producing enough, it's just we don't have the supply chain, the cold chain, the infrastructure to ensure that it's distributed efficiently to all parts of the country. So I decided agriculture was where I was going to hone. The problem was we weren't investing enough. It wasn't that we couldn't figure it out. We have a large amount of arable land. So within the African continent, this is like the final frontier for growing food, right? So if you're looking for land to grow food, Africa is the place you want to be. So we have more than enough land to grow the food that we need. And then the question is, okay, so where did I want to focus? Yes. And then I realized that everybody I spoke to, everybody was talking about crops. Nobody was talking about livestock. There was all this stuff happening, and Nigerians love meat, so we love to eat. We love protein. we love eating these foods, but how much are we actually investing in figuring out how we improve our supply chains, right? There are periods when Nigeria was importing chicken. Thank goodness we've kind of changed that around. We're still importing meat. We're still importing certain types of protein. But we have 20.7 million cows in this country, right? So it doesn't add up that we haven't figured out how to feed ourselves. So livestock seemed to be the place to focus because fewer people were investing and thinking about solutions towards livestock agriculture. And then there was just the selfish side of I love dairy, and the idea that if you want really good fresh dairy in Nigeria, it is 100% imported, right? If you really want really good fresh dairy, unless you have a cow and a farm and you're producing your own dairy products, the only good fresh dairy that you can get in Nigeria is imported. And imported, and you're, spending an arm and a leg just to kind of have like a little block of cheese, just to taste a little block of cheese, spending an arm and a leg to do that, right? And then I said, okay, so who's responsible for livestock? 95% of the cows in Nigeria are in the hands of pastoralists, right? So there is a specific population that is essentially looking after the livestock that we depend on. And these are smallholder farmers. They're living in extreme poverty, and they're completely excluded from the formal economy. So I decided that was the problem that I wanted to tackle. But more importantly, in terms of what dairy does for our population, there was a huge part for me that was interesting around nutrition. Dairy is a huge part of essential food for children, right? If you look across the world, dairy forms a huge part of childhood nutrition. Absolutely. And I began to ask myself, so what's going on in Nigeria? Nigeria has one of the highest rates of malnutrition for children under the age of 5. So 32% of children under the age of 5 in Nigeria are stunted. And what that means is that they are shorter than the height that they should be for their age. And if you don't address that before they reach the age of 5, it is irreversible. So no matter what you feed them, no matter what you give them after that age, they're not going to catch up. So that's why you hear a lot when people talk about nutrition, under 5 nutrition is where everybody focuses on, because if you don't get it right in those early years, then there's not much that you can do, right? And that leads to many, long-term effects, whether it's cognitive development, brain function, then ability to learn, then ability to earn degrees that are going to get them great jobs. So it kind of just you're almost in this like vicious cycle of you don't eat enough, you don't develop well, that limits your learning potential, that then limits your earning potential. And then you have children and the cycle continues and you keep going, right? So when you think about that, 20% of Nigerian children under the age of 5 are underweight. Again, it's that their weight at that age is less than what it should be on average, right? If they're eating properly. The other thing that was really fascinating to me is that these things are seen across income levels. So it's not just the poor that you're seeing some stunting or poor nutrition, right? The poor nutritional status you'll find in middle class children too. Because
Aisha, why is that? Why is that? Because I would think middle class parents would have better knowledge of nutrition, or am I just making an assumption?
So it's a difficult one, and this is something we're trying to look into more deeply at CHAM. It's that, is it a knowledge issue? So is it that we're making assumption that just because you're a middle-class parent, you know the right nutrients to be feeding your kid, you know what that balanced diet should look like? Is it that middle-class parents are too busy, so they're not actually on a day-to-day basis responsible for what goes on the plate of their children, right? So is it that, you've got a lot of parents that are working long hours and so don't have as much time to invest in thinking through what their kids are eating because somebody else is looking after their kids while they're at work? So there's that component as well. There's also the aspect of how affordable is nutritious food. So whether it's broccoli or spinach or, okay, well, we have local spinach, so maybe you take that out. But things that like the vegetables, right? How accessible are these nutritious food for a busy parent? And how affordable are these nutritious products, right? So there's a component around that you ask yourself, but I think there is a knowledge component to it as well, right? In terms of maybe when you've learned about nutrition, it's all centered around Western foods, right, and Western concepts. So when you think about, if you think about, at least I grew up in the UK, and we always had in school, you had that plate, and you could see the proportions of the plate of carbohydrates, proteins, and vegetables, right? And the question is, how much is that infused in education in Nigerian schools, right? Is that hammered into everybody to say, okay, this is what your plate should look like, and these are types of food that should form part of your balanced plate? So I think there's also an aspect of, are we teaching nutrition from the perspective of what we can source here locally, in terms of what foods here are good for us, for example? So, you talk a lot about fiber. How much are we encouraging Nigerians to buy local rice because it has higher fiber? And the reason why it has higher fiber, it's just the processing isn't as good. It's not that like we've consciously made a fada rice a higher fiber type of rice. It's just that like the sophistication of how a fada rice is being processed, it's not as sophisticated as the imported white rice you buy, right? But there are pros and cons to that, and the pros are that it has a higher fiber content.
Fiber content. Aisha, I'm really this. If you had shared these stats with me when my daughter was growing up, I think I would have been more scared or more aware. But now I'm scared. I'm like, we have children who are stunted 32%, and then 2 kg of milk per person per year consumed per capita, and then as opposed to 44 kg. These are things that we need to think about and really review. And I hope as many people who are on this broadcast and who watch the rebroadcast will pay close attention to this. I think even for us, there's lactose-free milk, I believe.
Yes.
Probably guys will get to that point, as well. There's lactose-free milk, so we can drink. I mean, if it's going to give us more hydration, I know I always have a bottle of water or my trusty old cup of water to stay hydrated. But if I'm going to get nutrients, even as I age, I want to also age well. I want to age in a good way, So, but for our children, it's very important. So you've hit on nutrition, you've hit on the economics of it, you've hit on the importance of serving the underserved. And I'll ask, how far has your business model proven to be successful? How far is it?
It's been quite the as I'm sure you can imagine, challenging journey to even scratch. Like, we're just scratching the surface at the moment. Cham was registered in 2018. It took us about 2 years to be able to build trusting relationships with the pastoralist to even start testing some of this, right? So working with smallholder farmers requires a lot of patience, and it's 100% built on trust. So that relationship building aspect, really, you just have to invest the time to be able to get these people to trust you. Over the past 1.5 years, we ran a pilot working with about 111 pastoralists. And our pilot was to test everything from how we get the milk from the cow, how we transport it, how we hire people within the community to serve as cham rangers to collect the milk, how we move the milk from these more rural locations to our factory. So we set up, we launched in the middle of the pandemic. This was like just 2 months or 3 months after lockdown. And essentially because we'd been working with our farmers for like 2 years, and they were getting impatient. And the risk was we would lose our credibility if we didn't start buying their milk. At that time we were trying to fundraise, which in itself was a huge challenge. And by the time we were able to get our funding, we needed to build a dairy processing facility. So unlike other crops where you can kind of, build a temporary warehouse here, buy a combine harvester here, get a mini milling machine, there are ways in which you can like do some basic things and get things moving. With dairy is so sensitive. Foods, when it comes to food safety, it's extremely sensitive when you think about dairy. So you can't just patch it up and do some basics, right? So we were very nervous about starting anything without having the built for purpose facilities to do so. But we said, you know what, let's just test this. So we bought a shipping container, a reefer. We converted it into a mini dairy processing facility. Got some local equipment, which didn't work in the end and broke down, but that's a separate story. But we really just wanted to say, okay, let's just start this chain moving. Let's start this process moving. Let's start collecting milk. Let's start testing it. Let's see whether or not we're going to have losses. Let's see where the pain points are. Let's see where the difficulty is. So we ran that pilot. Then we said, okay, you know what, this seems to be okay. So let's start, what are we going to produce? So we decided to produce Greek style, just to test Greek style yogurt. We recognized that there are a lot of premium customers that wanted this product. So we started producing this Greek style yogurt. Within a month, we were shipping this Greek style yogurt on air freighting it to Lagos to customers because there was such a strong demand for this product. So before we knew it, during this testing phase, we were already setting up, we were producing a product. And really for us, because we were at this pilot phase, we couldn't really sell it commercially. So we couldn't go to supermarkets because we were also trying to process our NAFDAC registration at the time. So all we could do is kind of really test the acceptance of the product to make sure that customers liked the way that it tasted, customers liked the packaging, customers were willing to pay at the price point that we were selling our product. So we tested all of that. We had an e-commerce platform, so you could literally go online, pay for your yogurt, and it would be delivered to you sometimes same day, depending on what time you ordered it, right? So we were able to test that for about 14 months. And during that time, we purchased and processed over 87,000 liters of milk. During that time, we were working with about 67% women. So within the pastoralist communities, the tradition is the man owns a cow, the woman owns the milk. So we were focused on signing up. As many women as we could. And by signing as many women as we could, it meant that we could still do it within those traditional structures, right? So our main thing at CHAM is that we try to work with these communities without disrupting too much of their tradition, right? Yes, we're bringing new ways of doing things, we're bringing new processes, but as much as possible, making sure that we preserve their cultures and we collaborate with them, right? So we go in and propose things, we sit down, we have town halls, and we co-create these solutions to make sure that they are suitable for those environments. And we're not just coming in trying to impose a certain way of doing things, because that's the way you get some kind of sustainable change, but sustainable development as well. So we worked with 67% women, as I mentioned. And I think the most successful part of this pilot was that on average, our pastoralists were earning about, I think, 582 naira a day from this additional milk that they were selling to us. And then our highest performer was this lady called Safia Adamu. And Safia Adamu was earning as high as 3,400 naira approximately a day. That's like over 100,000 naira a month in earnings, right? So milk business is good business, right? So what we sell to our communities is that this is a business. This is not a hobby. This is not just this tradition that you're used to because that's just what's passed on to you from family. This is a business, right? This is the way we can think about creating rural jobs, not just for older people, but for the youth, right? Because
Yeah.
you can actually earn good money by looking after cows and selling milk. So when we talk about pastoralists, we talk about people who care for cows. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter where you're based. As long as if you have cows, you're looking after them and you have milk available to sell to us that is of good quality, we will buy it.
Great. We have a comment from Tunde07. Hi, Tunde. He says, I salute your courage, Aisha. Well done to you and your team. Yeah, I salute your courage as well. I salute the fact that you've done so much back end work in it, and you're still doing it. And another interesting thing is that and I say this not to patronize in any way, but I've spoken to, and I speak to a lot of business owners on this program, and a lot of them don't have the facts at the fingertips like you do have. You know, some do, but these facts like Safia, I mean, that's a champion there. You know,
She
and
is.
all
She is.
those yeah, she's a champion. Yeah, she's a champion. And really, I like the fact what you said. You go in, you're doing, oh, yeah, somebody else is very proud of you. Oh, Tolu Olarinde. Thank you, Tolu. Thank you for joining. And thank you for your kind comments to Aisha, which I've just read out to her. Said, so proud of you, Aisha. Well done. Yes, you're proud of, and he sends a huggy. So huggy to you, Aisha.
So
Yes.
these are, I'm looking at these. These
Yes,
are
yes.
also supporters of Cham and have been supporting us all the way for a long time. So Tunde is a huge supporter. He has a dairy business as well. So it's so great to have him on the
Okay.
call. These are some of the people also that I've learned a lot from along the way.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody who joined. You know, the thing about collaboration, especially in business, is that it can be tricky. But when you get it right, you realize that we are all baking a bigger pie. We are not at odds with each other. We're all doing better. We're all doing better, you know. So thank you for champions who've joined us today. Thank you very much. Yes. Yes. You know, I like the fact that you go in there and while you're doing something slightly disruptive, you're respecting the traditional culture. You're co-creating with them. You know, I've never heard of the man owns the cow and the woman owns the milk, but it makes sense because our first guest on this series was from Plateau State, and she said the men own the farms, and the women are allowed to farm on them. And she was talking about potatoes and stuff like
Interesting.
that. So I do understand
Yeah.
that land use and land ownership is a very interesting dynamic in
Yes,
Nigeria. But that is
it
not the
is.
conversation for today. Yes, that's not the conversation. We will work with what we have until we can
Yeah.
get to where
Yeah.
we want to get.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
yes, yes, yes. So when these bottles come, is your milk branded? Is it branded Cham or your dairy product?
So yeah. So we're currently actually on a break. We're just finishing up a new very nice state of the art dairy factory. So when our milk comes out in about 2 months, it's going to be branded and it's going to be in glass bottles. And specifically, the reason why we chose glass packaging, it is more expensive, it is more difficult to handle, it is heavier.
Mhm.
But when I started Cham, a huge part of kind of the principles that I started with was how do we build food businesses, manufacturing businesses that have sustainability at the core right from the beginning. So when we talk about climate change around the world, we really don't talk about how it's impacted us, right? So the global
Mm.
south is has been more acutely affected. Well, maybe not more acute, but we are feeling the effects of climate change, and we weren't the polluters. That pollution came from the West and the northern hemisphere, not the southern hemisphere, right? But we are feeling it. Our rain patterns are changing. Northern Nigeria is getting drier and drier, which is what's causing kind of a migration southwards, because it's just a lot more difficult for farmers and livestock owners to keep their cows because there's no water or food available. So we need to think about sustainability. If you live in Lagos, your gutters are filled with plastic. That's why there's a lot of flooding on the roads, because nothing's moving through those gutters, right? And drainage systems. Plastic pollution is a huge problem in cities in Nigeria, and will continue to do so if we don't think about the packaging we use. So we started off, Cham, saying, okay, what do we do about sustainable packaging? Milk bottles, glass bottled milk has been around for, probably centuries now, right? I think people who lived in Western countries will tell you that, the milkman coming with milk bottles and delivering it in front of your door, that's part of some memory that they have, right? In fact, somebody in Lagos told me that in their day, they had milk deliveries and they drank milk from milk bottles, right? So it's also part of not so distant history of Nigeria where some of those things were readily available, right? It's my generation that's suffering from the fact that some of these things are no longer the priority. You laugh, but I'm always telling my mom, right?
I'm sorry.
I'm always telling my mom, right? I'm like, your generation, what happened, right? You guys always tell us about these wonderful memories you had, whether it's like you had all these really good teachers that taught you in school, and you had this wonderful education where you didn't have to travel abroad to go to really good schools, or you had access to all these wonderful foods, right, that were readily available to you. For my generation, we just hear the stories, right? Things have changed dramatically in Nigeria in a very, very short amount of time. But I think when you think about, I'm now losing my train of thought. What was the question? So that I make sure I answer the question that you asked.
I was just following you down that rabbit hole, and I was totally fascinated. We're talking about
climate change and packaging. Yes, Maimuna just left a comment,
packaging.
says climate change and sustainability. Yes. So we said, okay. I remember when I was very young, we used to buy soft drinks in crates, and you would return your crate and you get a new one, right? So I was like, okay, we have a recent history of people having the habit of buying beverages in glass bottles and returning it, and that behavior is still there. And that was a wonderful system before we started getting these PET bottles and cans, right? We had a good system that was sustainable where we were reusing our glass bottles for beverages. So I said, okay, so that's something Nigerians will understand. So why don't we think about glass bottles? And then, okay, so let's think about glass bottles. But we wanted to also think about sustainability from sourcing. So importing glass bottles was, how do we get glass bottles here in Nigeria? Then we went to the glass bottle manufacturer. So the biggest glass bottle manufacturer in Nigeria is Frigo Glass, also known as Beta Glass. So when we went there, it's like, okay, so they didn't have any bottles that were suitable for dairy. So they had beer bottles, they had the bottles for Coke and these other beverages, but they didn't have any bottles for dairy. So we were like, okay, so what's going to take for you guys to produce bottles for us? Well, they said you're going to have to invest in a mold. So we have to actually invest in the mold that's used to produce the bottles. And then we said, okay, so what's that going to cost? And they were like, oh, maybe at minimum, maybe looking at 20 million naira. So as a new business, as a small business, right, looking to go down the sustainable path, that's a huge investment. It is like prohibitive. You want to do the right thing, but all these things start coming, all these gates start being closed.
Yes.
And then we're like, okay, so maybe we need to import. And then when we get to a large enough size, then we can invest in this mold and have it produced locally, right? And there I am doing my research. And guess what? Nigerian has banned the importation of glass bottles.
Okay.
So as an SME, unless you invest in a mold for the product that you're selling, you neither can import, neither do you have the money to invest in the mold, right? So you're in this weird gulf. And I encourage our policymakers to really think about policies and thinking about how they make it still friendly for SMEs, right? Because there are things that you can do, even if you want to encourage local industries to say, maybe for a certain volume, you can import. But once you reach a certain threshold, right, of when you're doing higher numbers, like the large corporates that are doing beverages, maybe then for those kinds of numbers, you're forced to buy those bottles locally, right? Because you can actually invest in those things. But we just had to raise the money for this bottle mold. I was so adamant that I didn't want to go into plastic packaging. So we had to invest in that bottle mold. We are partnering with Frigo Glass. So our milk will be packaged in glass packaging, both our milk and our yogurt. So we're also sourcing our jars from Frigo Glass. Thank goodness they already had jars that we could use, so we didn't have to invest in another mold for the glass jars, because you have to, every mold you invest in, also for each size. So if you have multiple sizes of your products, each size for that packaging is another 20 million naira investment in a mold.
But are you going to keep it on? Are you going to keep it one size for the milk?
So right now we're coming out with 1 liter bottles for the milk, but we hope that based on what our customers want, we will start thinking about offering other options based on the demand from customers.
Okay, we have interesting comments going on. OG Jigs says the ban on the bottles and availability is prohibitive. Yeah, it is, obviously. I mean, 20 million for a new business, that is a whole lot of naira going down there. Yes, it is very prohibitive.
And that's excluding the cost of the bottle itself, right? So you invest in the mold.
Oh, there you go.
Then they need to then produce the bottles for you, right? So there's also a charge for the actual bottle that they're going to sell to you as well.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, some other comments here from OG Jigs. In what cities will your products be available? Before we answer that, let me just share something from Cham. It says, we invite you to join us on IG and Facebook in anticipation of our product launch this year. So maybe you could speak to that. When are you going to launch your products? What should we expect to see? And and where?
So October, watch out. So October,
yes.
Watch out. October, we're looking to relaunch our products. So if you follow us on all of our social media channels, or you can sign up for our newsletter on our website. So October, we'll be coming out with pasteurized milk and Greek style yogurt, and soon to follow with double cream. And also we're looking to expand the range to semi-skimmed milk, honey flavored yogurt, and then depending on what our customers want, we'll be coming with other flavors as well. But really, we're looking at sourcing our flavors also locally, right? So our honey is sourced locally, but also we're looking to partner with people who are looking to produce fruit concentrates made with Nigerian fruits that we can put into our products. So whether it's strawberries grown in Jos, if you are a strawberry farmer in Jos, or you're somebody who produces products from the strawberries in Jos, we'd love to work with you to think about a pureed strawberry concentrate to put in our product, in our yogurt, whether it's mangoes. So if you are working in the mango value chain, there's another business opportunity for you if you want to supply us with mango fruit compote that we can put in our yogurt. So there's so many exciting things that we're looking to bring to our customers. We're looking to come out with a kids focused range sometime next year as well, so that we can help mothers have nutritious products that they can put in their kids' lunchboxes as well.
Fantastic. Aisha, I have so many questions here. Let me just put a few up here, and it's all mostly about collaborations. It's like this is from Nanquat. Nanquat does she produces Greek yogurt, and she says commends you for doing a great job, and she would like to link up if that's okay to get some more information as she's into milk products. And,
yes, please.
Yes. Now, Kurt, we've put the this is response, so you could reach there directly, and you could check out the website, and you could also, now, Kurt, you can reach me if I know Aisha is extremely responsive, but I know she's also pretty busy, so you can reach me if you need to, so she can direct us. You know, that's the value of knowing people and talking to people. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And we have another question from Faye Kemi. And she says, her question to Aisha is this: have I been a bad African mom? You're not a bad African mom, you know. But have I been a bad African mom to having forced my daughter take milk like water from age 1? The only juice she took as snacks between ages 1 to 9 to school was milk. It paid off. Now she's 13, but 5'9". Oh my goodness, she's taller than me. With strong bones and long legs. She pretended to be lactose intolerant initially. So Aisha, tell me, am I bad?
There's no such thing as a bad mom for choosing what you feel is best for your child. I think it sounds like she had a wonderful childhood and really good nutrition from my standpoint.
Yes, 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 absolutely. I wish Fakem, I wish I had done this. I really wish I had done this. But my daughter still drinks all the milk and everything. Now, Adesha talks about policy. If policy were more rounded, PET would be banned and glass bottle manufacturers would themselves invest in molds for the market. I think that's one thing we like to do is to create ripples of collaboration, you know, throw the stone in the water and then see how people can come together. But I think it's getting to the point where we as a company have to midwife this process so that we can sit in the table, in the room and at the table with these policymakers and just find out what are their pain points. Everybody has pain points. Everybody has pleasure points, you know, and see what we can do. So even if they have a bigger win to begin with, but the SMEs also have a win. SMEs have a win. Okay, the last question is Juliet. She's a baker, a great baker, I must say. And she says she wants to know about butter production. Any move there?
We'd love to. I mean, once you have milk, you can pretty much make anything. So as we increase our volumes, we will definitely look into producing butter as well.
Okay, so October this year, you're looking forward. We are already following you as Juliet Consulting on social media. So we look forward. We are in Port Harcourt, but the world is small, so we shall be.
I was just talking to my head of B2B sales about Port Harcourt, right? And we're launching our primary cities. We're launching in is Lagos and Abuja, but we are looking at how we can test the Port Harcourt market in the next few months as well. So watch out. We'll be available at your usual retailers. Hopefully, we're having those conversations now, whether it's ShopRite, whether it's Spa. So we're engaging those retailers right now so that we can stock our products with them as well.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Aisha. This has been
Thank you for having me.
That's why we could spend time talking about little stuff. This is important, and the nutritional aspect of it. My goodness. I'm still looking at this 44 kg per person in Africa and 2 kg. And I'm just, wow. I'm blown. I'm blown. So, last question from me before I say thank you to you would be, if we are going to have a round table, if we can get together a round table with policymakers, would Cham Dairies be interested?
Yes, 100%. I think it's important that we are having these conversations and we're bringing our own set of experiences to policymakers so that we can give them real as being the important word there, giving them real views about exactly what we're facing, our own experiences, what it means for us as small growing businesses. Because I think sometimes they're probably at this level and we're down here. And I think it's important that they're able to also see what's going on with smaller actors as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we've listened to we've taken all the questions and the comments for now. I know many people have more questions, but usually it's like, how can we get, okay, somebody asked low fat yogurt. Is the milk free from additives and preservatives?
Yes, no, I think really good question. So our dairy, our products, so our yogurt and our milk is no preservatives, no additives. So it's just milk and live bacterial cultures that we use for our yogurt. Our milk is we just pasteurize it and bottle it, and that's it. And really for us, that's the freshness. But I think the other thing is that one of the things we also need to communicate a lot more is that we also need to educate people on what it means to consume fresh. What it means to consume fresh is that your product is not going to last as long. So if you buy, so I won't mention the name of our competitor, but they produce yogurt. It's in a Tetra Pak packaging, and it's very well known, but it doesn't need to be refrigerated. Why doesn't it need to be refrigerated? Because they've killed everything in it, right? So there's no live bacteria in there, right? Live bacteria requires a live environment. It needs to be refrigerated, at least a good live bacteria, right? So I think also for consumers, some of the things you need to think about is, okay, this product, they say refrigerate after opening, right? So before opening, what condition must it be to be able to stay that way? So if you buy our yogurt, yes, it needs to be refrigerated. If it's not refrigerated, then it's going to spoil. And that is, fresh stuff has to spoil, right? It's a living thing. I think we're so used to processed foods and buying in bulk and storing in our pantries. And that's just a necessity because of the environment we live in. We don't have consistent power. So it's understandable, right? That's just survival here. But it just means that when we think about fresh, we have to start thinking about, maybe I only do my shopping and it lasts me a couple of days and I shop again. It is difficult. It is challenging. But if you do want fresh produce, you won't be able to keep it for a long period of time. So you have to be more of a frequent shopper than a bulk shopper of those fresh products, so to speak.
Okay. We actually have to, this has gone on a little bit longer, but there's a question on sugar and it's from my sister. So, I have to ask this question, Aisha.
No worries. I'm available for as long as you want.
Yeah. It said, in this growing age of health consciousness, what's the use of sugar in your products?
We don't add any sugar to our products. When you, for those that have tasted our yogurt, it's actually really, really good on its own. You actually don't need to add anything to it because there are natural sugars in milk and therefore natural sugars in our yogurt. So we don't add any, again, we don't have, when we say there are no additives, we literally mean we don't add anything else. It's just milk for our milk. And then we add bacterial cultures and that's it. We don't add anything else. For our honey yogurt, we did have honey and we added like little bit of honey at the bottom. So depending on how much you wanted to mix, also you could control the amount of honey that was in there. But really, we leave it to the customer to decide then what else they want to add to their product. So you buy our natural yogurt, it's unsweetened, and then you can add whether it's honey, whether it's stevia, whether it's agave syrup, granola, raisins. You choose what you want to add to sweeten it.
You make your own deliciousness.
Exactly.
Okay, Olu asked, Olu Ogunyemi asked, can we have a recording of this? It will be available by tomorrow, today, on the recording. It will be available on YouTube at Julia Jacks Consulting. It's okay. I don't want to touch this Instagram thing just in case but it's at Julia JULIA JACKS Consulting. It will be up on YouTube by the end of the day. But thank you very much. I have had, as I thought, a lovely and a very engaging time. But Aisha, you've taught me a lot about, and I hope other people who have listened, about the importance of doing your homework, do background work. Do not be afraid to not own 100% of the pie. Bring in investors, bring in advisors. Don't go, if you want to go far, you can't go alone. That's the truth, you know. So be open, and then when you go in, as we disrupt, please be careful to respect the cultures that we are working in. Very important. Thank you, everyone on IG. Thank you very much. I have to shut down now before we're shut down, you know. And thank you very much, everybody who's joined us on Facebook. I really do appreciate you. And Aisha, thank you. Thank you very much. So I shall be reaching you, Aisha, on the plan we have to talk to people. Yes, to talk to the policymakers. Yes.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.